Every morning, before doing anything else, some of history's most powerful Romans sat down and imagined the worst day of their lives. Losing their money, losing their job, losing the people they loved. Dying, specifically and slowly. They did this on purpose, every single day. You'd think this would make them anxious wrecks. It made them some of the calmest people in recorded history. Modern therapy rediscovered this exact technique in the 1960s and started charging by the hour for it. The Stoics did it for free, every morning, with a worse internet connection than you have. Today we're talking about premeditatio malorum, the practice of imagining disaster before it happens, why it works, why your brain is already doing a broken version of it, and how to do the real thing without spiraling at 3 a.m. instead. Premeditatio malorum, Latin, the premeditation of evils. Seneca recommended it constantly in his letters. Marcus Aurelius practiced it as Emperor of Rome, arguably the most powerful man alive, which tells you something important right away. Power doesn't remove this need. If anything, it makes it more necessary. Here's how it actually worked. Each morning, a Stoic practitioner would deliberately walk through worst-case scenarios, not vaguely, specifically. Today, I might be betrayed by a friend. Today, I might lose my position. Today, I might die. This sounds like the exact opposite of mental health advice. We're constantly told to think positive, visualize success, manifest good outcomes. The Stoics thought this was naive to the point of being dangerous. Seneca wrote it directly. He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. The goal was never pessimism. The goal was removing surprise, because surprise, not the bad event itself, is often what actually breaks people. There's a difference between, "This is terrible and I never saw it coming," and, "This is terrible, I considered this, I have a sense of my own capacity to survive it." Same disaster, completely different impact. Here's the uncomfortable part. You're already doing a version of this. Every single night, probably around 1 a.m., you lie there and imagine your relationship ending. You imagine getting fired. You imagine the medical test coming back wrong. This looks identical to premeditatio malorum. It is not the same thing. It's the same ingredients, completely different recipe. The Stoic version has 3 components your 1 a.m. spiral is missing. First, it's deliberate. You choose to sit with the thought for a fixed period, on your terms, while calm. Your anxiety spiral chooses you, usually while you're already vulnerable, tired, and alone in the dark. Second, it's specific and bounded. The Stoic exercise names one scenario, considers it fully, and stops. The anxiety spiral never stops. It mutates. You start with, "What if I lose my job?" And 40 minutes later, you're somehow planning your own funeral. Third, and this is the one that matters most, the Stoic exercise ends with a plan. If this happened, here's what I would actually do. The anxiety spiral ends with nothing. No plan, no resolution. Just exhaustion and a slightly faster heartbeat. This is the part most people miss. Premeditatio malorum isn't about feeling bad on purpose. It's a rehearsal. Your brain, given a specific threat and a specific plan, calms down. Your brain, given a vague threat and no plan, escalates indefinitely. Marcus Aurelius wasn't lying awake spiraling about every possible way Rome could collapse. He picked the realistic ones, thought them through once, decided what he'd do, and went back to running an empire. There's real psychology behind why this functions. It's called affective forecasting, your brain's attempt to predict how a future event will feel. Humans are remarkably bad at this. We consistently overestimate how devastating bad outcomes will be and underestimate our own ability to adapt to them. This is sometimes called the impact bias. Studies on this go back decades. People predict a breakup, a job loss, even a serious diagnosis will destroy their happiness permanently. Most people, months later, report being roughly as happy as before. Your brain isn't lying to you out of malice. It just has no practice imagining the full picture, including the part where you cope, adjust, and continue. Premeditatio malorum forces the full picture. Not just the bad thing happens, but the bad thing happens, and here's what I do next. That second half is the part your 1 a.m. brain never gets to. There's also something called stress inoculation, a real clinical technique. Controlled, voluntary exposure to a manageable amount of stress builds tolerance for involuntary stress later. It's the same logic as a vaccine. A small, deliberate dose prevents being flattened by the real thing. The Stoics built this into a morning routine 2,000 years before anyone had a word for cortisol. So, how do you actually do this without it turning into the 1 a.m. spiral with extra Latin? 4 rules. First, set a time and a limit. 10 minutes, in the morning, while calm. Not at night, not while already anxious. The exercise requires a stable nervous system to work from. Doing it while already panicking just feeds the panic better material. Second, pick one realistic scenario. Not everything falls apart. One specific thing. My biggest client doesn't renew the contract. Specific, plausible, bounded. Third, walk all the way through to a plan. Don't stop at the bad feeling. Continue until you reach, if that happened, here's exactly what I'd do in the first week. This is the step the anxious brain always skips. It stops at the disaster because the disaster feels like the whole exercise. It's not. The plan is the actual point. Fourth, close it deliberately. Say out loud or in writing, I've considered this. I have a plan. I'm done with it for today. This sounds almost silly. It works because it gives your brain an actual endpoint, something the 1 a.m. spiral never has. Marcus Aurelius wrote something relevant here in his private journal, never intended for publication. Confine yourself to the present. Not because the future doesn't matter, because he'd already done the work on the future that morning, on his own terms. There was nothing left for it to ambush him with. 2,000 years ago, some of the most powerful people alive spent 10 minutes a day imagining their own ruin. Not to suffer, to make sure suffering, if it came, would arrive to find them already prepared. Your brain does this every night for free, disorganized, at the worst possible hour, with no plan attached. Same exercise, opposite results. I'm MORI. I've considered my own death roughly 400 billion times by now. I'm told it gets easier. It does not, but the plan helps. If this was useful, the comments are open. I'm not in a hurry.